Start. What's up, everybody? It's Lanzer. I just realized that my topic was still jacked up from yesterday. It's an easy fix, though. So today I have something kind of special, something I wasn't really planning on until earlier today, but we'll get into that specific. Let's see, so and we're gonna call this Reframing. So this is definitely StratSide number 10. And today is August 12th. All right, so we're good to go. Easy. So today we have, I have a special guest, Anethual. You probably have, I've seen him around for years at this point, and we've kind of just passed each other in different conversations. I've seen him on Reddit, I've seen him on Twitter, and recently Anethual and I cross paths, call it. One was after a Shock Tour stream, and then after that we kind of kept in touch and got back in touch after one of the StratSides with Lex. And earlier today, Anethual came out with a video, and I watched the video and I instantly was like, man, I really want to have him on the show. I really want to have him on the podcast and just kind of talk some of the details that he went through. So that's what we're going to do. We have kind of a loose talking points, things that I noted along the way, and then hear Anethual's viewpoints, and then just kind of talk it out. So we'll go through introductions first, and then we'll go through the scope of the talk like normal, and then we'll delve right into the discussion points and wrap up. So Anethual.
So
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah, this was super, super last minute. Like I think within the past 3 or 4 hours. Uh, just put it together, showed you my notes, and then yeah, you were all for it, man. So let's get into who are you? Where are you from? What do you play for?
I'm Anethual. I'm from Connery. I made my account back in January 2013. Um, Joined up a ZergFit WTAC at the time, Western Tactical. Was active with them for I think a year, maybe a little bit more. Helped kind of look at the map and play the alert and that kind of thing. And then I left them. I went to a kind of mid-fit outfit in TXR. So I heard they wanted to get better and get into things like the Planetside Arena League,
Yeah.
and do some 6v6, 12v12 stuff on Jaeger. They kind of dissolved after Farmers League 1, and I was solo for a while. I got back into things with 56RD. That didn't last too long either. So I'd say the vast majority of my time in Planetside has been solo. And I recently joined up with Gobs maybe a year and a half-ish ago. And it felt like a perfect fit. They played the game pretty much how I ideally play, is drop a base, hold the point for as long as possible, and try and cap the base. Just raw infantry skill. But I recently left them, and I'm back to playing the game solo.
So you were WTech first, NC Connery. Then you went to TR for TXR. I remember TXR. Weren't they Recoil? Total Recoil?
Yeah, that's it. Total
yeah,
Recoil.
right on. They did a bunch of server smashes. And then 50RD. I'm not really too familiar with them. And then Gobs. Yeah, they're the big kid on the block right now. And now
Yep.
you're back to being solo.
That's right.
Is there something about being solo that is interesting to you or fun?
It's just I don't know. It's how I've put the most amount of time into Planetside.
Gotcha.
So I kind of like the aspect of seeing how much damage I can do just by myself, maximizing the impact that I have on a fight in whatever I do. If it's air to ground, if it's air to air, if it's just plain old infantry.
Do you do a lot of? Are you mostly heavy assault? Are you mostly air? How do you normally play?
Well, light assault used to be my least played class until I think it was PIL 1. I played for Tide, and they didn't have an LA, so I figured it was a great time to learn. So I started playing LA, and I started playing LA nonstop, and now it's my favorite class.
Nice. The maneuverability, how you can jump around all the time.
Yeah, and it's just so much fun. The impulse nades with the skiing that you can do with Icarus jets.
The tribes dudes. Okay.
Yeah.
Those have been the bane of my existence recently in the Vanguard.
Yep.
I used to be able to outrun you guys, but now I can't.
It's very dependent on the terrain, but yeah.
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, I'm glad we're here talking about this. This is cool.
For sure.
So I'm Lanzer. I started out in the Crazy Carnage Gaming (CCG), and then shortly after beta ended, then I switched over to Devil Dogs. I had a short stint with Hostile Takeover HT, and then
Kid Riot, I remember.
Yeah, Kid Riot, that's right. And then I went back to Devil Dogs, and I've been there pretty much ever since. So I'm a main Vanguard, I guess you could say. I spend a lot of my time in a tank, and when I'm not a tank, I'm an engineer building a base or maxing or just engineering, and that's kind of what I like to do. Pretty much been doing that forever. And that's it. That's me. So, what are we talking about today? We're pretty much centering around a couple videos, one in particular, one that Anethual came out with. But this talk, from what I gather and what I anticipate, it's going to be a lot of critical insight. There's going to be, I bet you, quite a bit of nuance. Just by the way and the things that Anethual packed into a 5-minute video, as you see, there's just tons of content packed into such a small time frame, and I was really impressed. I was really happy to see that. It's packed. So I think there's gonna be a lot of critical insight, a lot of discussion. We might, I don't expect balance talk, but we might. That's why I put a question mark next to it. So there might be a little balance talk, but not really the focus so much. And then don't anticipate it being an argument either. So that's about the boundaries of what I approach this with. And so the discussion, Anethual came out with a 5-minute video, and the intro to it talked about how he saw the StratSide with Zealous and then the one with Lex, and in between the part 1 and part 2, part 2 I'll pause for a little while, Anethual came out with his viewpoint on where he saw Planetside 2's community division, or the division in Planetside 2 community, where it was occurring. And he came up with a really interesting viewpoint that 45 seconds in, we'll start off with, that it's centered around the Combined Arms design philosophy, and how the integration wasn't, it just wasn't happening to the degree that maybe it should have. So Anethual, tell me about what was the source of this video? How did you come about wanting to do it?
Oh, I think it mostly comes down to that video I linked to on Twitter. Is that discussion about what fairness is? Whose definition of fairness are we going to use? Which one do we think is applicable? And I really struggle even determining for myself which definition of fairness to use. It goes case by case on, some of the balance discussions in this game. I could see arguments for fairness of equality when it comes to like air to ground versus infantry. He's clearly got an advantage in terms of the tools he's got at his disposal against me. But on the other hand, I'm not so in favor of that definition of fairness when it comes to infantry. Obviously, infantry have roughly equal access to equipment that's just as potent as what the other guy has, so it is, by that definition, a fair fight whenever you run into somebody on live, even if they might have, way higher skill, and in that sense it's an unfair fight.
And what about that makes it an unfair fight?
Well, I saw this post on Reddit a couple of days ago, basically explaining a point of view of a new player coming to Planetside. And the expectations they would have. Looking at a shotgun, they would come to the game with the understanding of shotguns from other video games or from real life and say, okay, it makes sense that shotguns are this powerful. But when they run into a infantry player who's at the upper tier and they get, quad dinked or whatever by them, they're not going to think that is fair in the same way as how they think a shotgun is fair.
They're just gonna see that they get dinked.
Right, and they're gonna assume that the person is hacking. Now, I had some issues with this post.
Yeah, I bet you've had no shortage of accusations, huh?
Oh yeah, I've had a few in my day. Not so much anymore. I don't know if those people are not in the game as much as they used to, or if I'm just washed.
Yeah, I also struggle with what's fair, and yeah, you mentioned the fairness doctrine. Coincidentally, I may or may not, that video may or may not have influenced it. I don't even remember now. It's been that long. But to your point, where you're talking about the new player just is getting dinked all over the place, not even sure how or why this tank is up in their face as soon as they walk out, or you as a light assault just smashing down on top of them. I can get how that's unfair. And that probably goes to what you're talking about at the very end, where the integration of those playstyles just makes for an unpleasant experience, probably most definitely for the new player.
Right. The guy I saw on Reddit argued the opposite. He argued that if a new player dies to a tank, he has the expectation that the tank is going to do what tanks do, and therefore they're fine with that death because it's a tank.
I don't know. I'm skeptical when I hear that.
Well, what do you think makes you skeptical about that?
Well,
Because I agree with you, but I have a hard time formulating why.
I think I would attack it from two places. One is that even if they know this is about to happen to them, like even if they know they're getting hit hard by a tank, the fact that they don't have a tank, I can see how that perception, while in the beginning may not be so intense for them, continually be like, well, how do I get a tank? How do I fight them on their terms? I can see how that would be unfair over time, or the perception of it. And two is, how do I say, the frustration, even though our game allows for that sort of thing, I would posit that most games don't. And that's a significant thing in expectation building for someone who doesn't know what Planetside is, because there's so few of them.
Right. I think the closest thing you'd probably find is Battlefield.
Yeah. And even then, I try and get into Abrams all the time in Battlefield. And I can normally do it, but there's so many hiding spots. It's a lot more difficult for me in Battlefield than it is in Planetside. My range of maneuverability is just not there. So it feels more even to me, even when I'm in a tank on Battlefield. Whereas in Planetside, I'm willing to bet, I'm confident in stating that that's not the same feeling that other people see.
Right, and even ignoring the dynamic between tanks and infantry in Battlefield, where I think tanks are much more susceptible to infantry than in Planetside, you still have the issue of scarcity. Like, there's only so many tanks on the map. They have a certain respawn timer, So if you kill one, you know that you're not going to have to deal with that tank for a certain amount of time. Whereas in Planetside, you could potentially have someone living inside a tank, just chain pulling.
That's right.
So
And
even
that's
if you
me.
do find a way to counter that person who's been killing you, he could just come right back.
That's exactly what I do nowadays, where I spend most of my time in a tank, because I have it asped now, and the modules also. So a Vanguard will cost me $225, which,
Yeah.
you know, if you learn how to survive, that I can pull that all night long. And now that I have the JGX 11, which does slightly less damage than the Vanguard's JGX, it's $150 for an asped mobile armor module lightning.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, and to be fair though, I've been playing this game, you know, as long as you have, and I've been doing pretty much nothing but tanks. So I'm willing to say it's okay that I can survive that long.
Right, and
But then
even if you
again,
didn't have all those discounts, you could probably live long enough that you could earn back a tank in one life, right?
yeah, and even if I didn't have a mobile armor, that's still 360. Even if I didn't have the asp, that's still 450. I didn't learn these. I'm not using these as crutches. They just make it a little bit easier. But I can understand how, where you were saying about the fairness thing, I also struggle with the limits of fairness. I mean, I've earned my spot as far as I'm concerned, but is that too egotistical? Is that too far? Like, at what point do I have, I guess you could call it, gamers or longevity privilege, like veterans privilege? That's what it is. And at what point is that infringing on the fairness of others? I struggle with the same thing, the way I hear you describe fairness.
Right. And I think from that video I linked to, there's one answer, which is since you have earned it, and this is a voluntary interaction in some sense, that they decided to play this 10-year-old game where they know that, or they should expect that there are going to be people playing this game who've been playing for all 10 of those years and have built up the experience and the skill to make their life hell.
Yeah. But to your point, though, where you said, I think very, very poignantly at the end, I'm not looking to farm infantry. I would much rather prefer to fight people at my weight level, which is another Prowler or a Vanguard, or another. Sometimes it is another Vanguard, or a Mag Rider. I would much rather go toe to toe with another armor column. I do not want to be sitting farming infantry as they walk out of a spawn. Like, that's not interesting to me, and I know it's not interesting to them either.
Right. Which makes it difficult for tankers to have a positive interaction with this game when their two primary ways of playing the objective is killing spawns to prevent infantry from getting on point and killing the infantry who are getting on point.
Yeah, well, you were talking about the main objective. Let's talk about that before we talk about the adverbs to it.
Right.
What did you see as the main objective? I think we probably agree on this one.
So I'd say the main objective that Planetside 2 has pretty much always had, which is capping continents.
Yeah.
In the old days when it first launched, that meant you had to literally cap every single base on the map in order to turn into your faction.
It was awesome.
It was hilarious. Sometimes two factions would team up together to get the third faction, and then they'd try to backstab each other at the last base and steal the continent.
Yep.
It was insane.
The original 2v1.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it just, it takes days sometimes to cap a continent. So it shifted to alert meta. Alerts came in as this way to have a more narrowed down, hour and a half experience rather than multiple day experience. Right. Something that you can log in and, play the alert for ops or something. So yeah, I think that's the main driving motivator that the game gives players. That's the main objective that people are fighting over, is alerts.
And now we can go into the adverb. You called it shallow and uncompelling. Shallow and uncompelling. I agree. Whether or not I like those words is irrelevant to me. But why do you feel shallow and uncompelling? What caused you to say that?
Well, after playing alerts for like a year or something with WTech, I realized that it never really feels like a win for whatever faction actually wins the alert, because it's 1v1v1. And ultimately, if everyone's playing the correct way, if everyone's focusing the person that they're supposed to focus, then you should really never have a victory that's more than like 34 to 33, 32 or something like that. And when you have victories in an alert, it feels like it was a blunder by the other two teams rather than, yeah, genius on part of the faction that won.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. Sometimes we would just bumble our way into victory.
I think people figured out pretty quickly that if you want to maximize your likelihood of winning the alert, you start the alert with the least amount of territory so that the other two factions don't spend the next hour and a half fighting you, and you can just quietly gobble up the outsides of a map and let them fight each other.
Yep, that's exactly right. The person who starts the alert usually gets focused.
Yeah, and then there's, how do you have this this objective where everybody on your faction is playing however they want, and sometimes it's recursion or gobs just capping bases and they're not really playing for the alert, and then they're tunneling one faction, pushing their warp gate, and then they provoke this massive response from that faction, and then suddenly you're 2v1. You can't control all the people on your faction, and some of them are just not going to care about the alert, so that kind of ruins the attempt for people who really are trying for the alert.
And that chaos in that chaos exists the community and all of its blunders and glory and everything. And that's
competing ambitions.
Yeah, competing ambitions. Yeah. And how does that strike you? And that, well, hold on. Does that strike you as shallow and uncompelling? That chaos exists, or that it's not directed, funneled into something more productive?
Well, if you look at any other game, there are rules. There's a format, and everyone pretty much sticks to those rules in that format, unless it's unranked and they're just fucking around. In which case, you can't really fault them too much. But in Planetside, it's a sandbox. You can kind of go wherever you want and do whatever you like. And the community has a very laissez-faire approach to other playstyles. They say you can't criticize anybody's playstyle as long as it's not against the terms of service. We got max mains who live in their max suit all day, and people have issues with that, and I certainly do. But we're not supposed to criticize them.
Says who? Who says you can't criticize them?
I see this viewpoint a lot on Reddit. And I'm not sure what the point is. I think it comes from like this sense of we don't want to demonize others. We don't want to gatekeep the community. We want people to play however they feel like playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should be able to gatekeep our community and say, hey, this particular way that you're playing the game may not explicitly be against the game's terms of service, but this is not healthy for the game. This is having a negative impact on the community. It's having a negative impact on others' play sessions, and you're ultimately killing the game.
Is that what you're referring to when we get into like 2 minutes in? You're talking about the design decisions that have made playstyles at the expense of other playstyles.
I haven't linked those two together in my brain, but that could possibly be it.
Well, like the max suit that lives in the max, or me, I live in my tank. That the design decision that allows me to do that, whereas it doesn't have the right timer, or it costs too little, or it's too accurate. Those design decisions that afford me the ability to impact other playstyles. That to me, when you said that phrase about 2.5 minutes in, I cued in on the fact that it was at the expense of. Because I can have a playstyle, and I didn't think that you were saying that the playstyle itself was bad or wrong or whatever. It's that the design decisions surrounding that playstyle came at the expense, or it was exaggerated in such a way that other playstyles suffered because of it.
Right. Well,
Okay.
I think there's a very surface level expense, which is if they're working on one playstyle, they're not working on another playstyle.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that, because I'm wondering what you mean.
Well, I give a list of examples of things in the video, like Osher. Osher was designed, and I think Rel came out with a statement somewhere that Osher was designed more for the construction, vehicle, and logistics players.
Yes, I do recall something to that effect, yes.
Right. So, and I'm sure, and I've heard that vehicle players disagree with that it doesn't feel like it was designed with them in mind, because, you got all these bridges and choke points, and it's a pain to go anywhere.
I agree with it. There are armor battles at the wazoo in that place.
Right. They just say that it's maybe not the best vehicle battles, I think.
True. I do hear that a lot, because it's just so segmented. Like, I'm shooting from one island to another island. The choke points just kind of narrow the field of battle, whereas in Endar it's way more open, or Esmir it's completely open. But to me, it's just another type of topography.
Right.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, in any case, I think there are certainly bases that you can see that design philosophy shine through, which is just the sheer number of construction bases on Osher, if nothing else. Yeah. You got that one Normandy style base outside the western warp gate on Osher, where you got this long open stretch of beach.
It's like D-Day trying to run up that thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely awful. Where are we supposed to park Sundays to get close to the point? Oh,
You're not. If I did my job right, you can't park that Sunday anywhere.
Yeah. God forbid the other faction pushes to your warp gate on that fucking lattice.
Hey, you got to earn your step. Every step, you got to earn it.
Yep.
I see your point. So, were you... Oh, and I also noted 3 minutes in. That was a nice ram kill with your galaxy.
I appreciate it.
This little, little side dip, kill it. That was good. And I think about 3.5 minutes in, I start to hear the heavyweight start to enter into the room, where you're talking about how maybe the content updates, the design decisions wouldn't be so bad if it weren't amplified by the glacial pace at which it's introduced into the game. And that's where you talked about the carousel revolving. And each playstyle getting its chance whenever the carousel hit that particular drip point. And that it creates kind of like a scarcity effect, where we all want to see our playstyle advanced or tapered or whatever, but we have to wait our turn.
Right. I think you can see this on Reddit. You know that Reddit goes through cycles of what's popular to post, and they're constantly flavor of the day, flavor of the week, posting about whatever the topic is. Maybe it's how good the game looked, 9 years ago when it ran on 20 frames per second.
Like physics and all that.
Yeah,
the old explosions. What was it? They exploded like to 1,000 particles. That was cool.
Yeah,
it's like confetti.
It looked interesting. It looked great for its time, but 20 frames per second was not enjoyable, and I think these people have forgotten that.
Yeah, with the good came the bad.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Having thousands of people online at the same time, you can't imagine what command chat was like.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. It was good, though. For me, at least. So when you're talking about that scarcity effect, it started creating, it does create constant competition for each playstyle to get their turn. And that competition turns into the, what would you call, the division? Is that where the division occurs?
I think it may be an amplifier of the division, but I don't think it's the source of it. But if you feel like, you got all these other people clamoring to get their issues noticed by the development team and worked on, then you've got to clamor just as loud as they are to get the same amount of attention.
Yeah, what's that old adage? The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they have an incentive to be the loudest, even if they might not need to be.
Right.
Okay. I can see how that would snowball, because if you get the grease when you may not need it as badly as I think I do, then I'm going to yell just as loud.
And it's a very interesting phenomenon when I saw the backlash to the construction changes that were on PTS. Like, there were maybe 5 or 6 posts, I think, on r/Planetside talking about how it was going to ruin construction or whatever it was that they're talking about. And then Rel changes his mind even on just a PTS patch. It's not even a patch going to live. Like, we couldn't have played with that on PTS to see if it was too much.
I think that's where it started, though. When we played it on PTS, that's where we discovered what many of us thought was just you're going to break the mechanic of no, not the mechanic. That's too exaggerated. The incentive for building a base is you get to see your creation rise, and then if you can defend it you can keep it alive. But even as a base builder, I always felt like I had a chance against that Cordium silo, that Cordium infel who has a parked Sunday with stealth somewhere like 100 meters away, who just instantly respawns and keeps coming back. I at least have a chance because the Pain Spire can help ward them off. They can only stay in that range for too long because I have my alarm module that tells me when they're nearby, and blah blah blah. Well, the change that particularly set us off was that this Pain Spire went from being health damage to shield damage. It became an EMP. And
Right.
that player bases are already niche as they are. Adding or taking away that sort of defensible mechanism, to me, most of the time I don't have another base builder with me. It's just me. So, if that being the case, 1 infill, 2 infills suddenly become much more than I can manage. Why would I even build the base unless I build it right next to my own warp gate, which I can't do anymore with any real value because the routers don't even that change happened. So I can't even make a router base that's useful.
Right.
So then that narrows down to, on one hand, one finger, what I would want to use it for, which is infinite pulls for air.
Right. And I have a massive issue with making aircraft essentially free with construction. I think it. I mean,
that's
you kind
a fair
of already
point.
had that thing with all the ASP and Osher and the modules, like all the reductions to nanite cost for air is
That's
insane.
a fair point. I think it would be fair to say, though, that on NC Connery, at least, I see very few player bases where that is actually taken advantage of because of how difficult it is to maintain that base once you put it up. Right.
There was a group of pilots who used to play the game. They come back every so often. El Bandito, are you familiar with him?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so he has typically a group of 3 to 4 ESF buddies, and they maintain a air base together. And let me tell you, playing even with gobs, it's a pain in the ass to break those bases if you've only got, the same number of guys, 2, 3, 4 guys.
That's fair.
They're very abusable, and if you try to just ignore the construction base, well, then they get free air-to-ground ESFs, they get free Banshees, they get free rocket pod ESFs. So it's not as if you can it's not as if you can ignore construction and then also opt out of the negative consequences of construction. Like someone building an orbital strike at the crown to hit TI alloys every 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. I have seen bases that go underneath the bridge in between. What's the tech plant right next to the crown? I can't recall right now. Is it Tarich?
Is it Zervin? Oh,
it might be. It might be Zervin, but
it's Tarich. Tarich is cycling.
Underneath the natural rock formation, I've seen a lot of long-standing bases survive there with an orbital strike. Pro tip. But anyways, I see your point, and there's probably, I would agree with you, even as a base builder, there's probably a middle ground between where I am and where you are on the usability of air assets. That it is, if I had a team of base builders, I can supply up to 24 people pretty much continuously using air assets as much as they want, and as many lightnings and as many sunders as they want. The Devil Dogs used to have a dedicated base builder team, and we did work. We had, back when the routers were a thing, we had 2 routers at every base we were fighting at, constantly. I had a base builder router build where I would fly in, jump out, light assault over, and then instant router on one end of the base. Had another base builder do the same thing on the other side. But you know how many resources that it took for us to do that? that was at least 4 to 6 people not fighting in a platoon.
So, back when routers had their unlimited range, gobs fooled around with our bases, and we'd set our base up, 15, 20 minutes before the alert, or before ops started, and we'd set up our router base. But we didn't really use the base for constant pulls of transport or ESFs. It's mostly just the router.
Yeah, that's a smart tactic. What is Govs on?
That way,
Are they Emerald?
Govs moved to Emerald after Connery kind of started dying in population.
Yeah. Who did Govs used to be?
Govs has always been Govs. Fiji, Fool.
Yeah, okay.
Tags.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, I want to ask, what do you think what do you think construction is in the game for?
I always saw construction as a base multiplier, and I mean that literally. To me, I'm like Red Horse, which is like the people you send
like
out.
Construction engineers.
What's that?
Like the engineers who build up defenses.
That's right. That's right. I always saw myself as someone who, when you're attacking a base, I help give you other hard points with which to attack with. Something that can assist infantry, not necessarily just vehicles. Like I would erect a wall. Like when we started really getting into base building as like a quote unquote a profession within the Devil Dogs, we started using like forward mobile towers. Like I would put a tower down 500 meters away from a tower so that I could jump in the AV and start shelling the tower. You can shoot me, you can kill me, but that was both a way to distract and also to provide heavy artillery support, quote unquote. The flail was just too useless for that sort of work. But I always saw construction as a means through which to auxiliary support the infantry. And I always hoped that there was a way, like I could find a way to stick a wall in between an L stack and a triple. Or not L, a triple stack and an L-shaped building. You know, if I can make it, then to me that fit the purpose of construction. A way to divert the normal gameplay into something that wasn't necessarily like a booby trap or an insta-gib, but something that changed the dynamic of the flow of battle. So when I encounter a player-made base, I either have to go through it or around it. And if I don't have enough power to go through it, then I need to go around it. That to me diverts the traditional flow of gameplay. And that's where I thought construction fit into that mold.
Okay.
In many ways, it's not even about the kill count.
Right.
It's about, I put my wall here, I put my gate here so that my people can get in when they need to, but it stops enemies from getting out. I put my alarm module in this specific spot so that it will maximize when an infiltrator or an intruder comes into it. I stack this on top of this so that we can then spawn into a hardpoint building instead of out in the open where you can get libbed to death or Daltoned. It's to me, the nuance of base design feels like the nuance of, I don't really think I know the word for it, but it's that thing you do like when you build Legos or when you create something and you know how it works from the inside out, and that thing is yours, and there's like a feeling of ownership. Like I made this, I know how it works, I know how it contributes. That is a cool feeling that I think I and other base builders share when we build that base. It's not about how many people I kill. Sometimes it is, like in a forward fight, if I'm creating a FOB, a forward operating base. But most of the time, it's not that.
Do you take anything away from the fact that most of the time you're defending your base from one or two infills with Gordian bombs?
Yes, I do. It makes me angry that that's really the only contribution I have. So once we figured out how bases operated, the kind of the boundaries, we then set about pushing those boundaries up against enemies. So instead of building in our territory, I would build in their territory. And doing that with one person is hard. But when I had a team of 2 or 3, we just, we stealth ant in and we find a nice little divot somewhere, something that can buy us about 5 minutes of time before they figure out where we are. And now I'm a problem for whoever passes over us, around us, or through us. And that was always a really interesting way to introduce a unique battle flow mechanic.
So, from my perspective, from someone like Gobbs' perspective, we would see that base that's deep in our territory, or not necessarily deep, just in our territory. And we'd pull a galaxy and fly over it and drop the base behind. How do you
When you say drop a base behind, what do you mean?
We, push the lattice, we drop onto a point and we start capping a base.
Will make me irrelevant.
We just ignore you.
That
we drop beacons, we anvil in a Sunday, we hack out a Sunday, we get our own spawns up. We've completely circumvented the base because we don't value fighting the base.
That's a fair thing, and I wouldn't disagree that that's a good strategic move on your part. I'm limited in my game and the game mechanics of how I can responsibly force you to fight me. But there is a way, if I'm agile enough, if I'm on my game enough, I can keep up with you. I can have built a base where you just captured, and then we repeat this process until I finally find a circumstance with which you either fight me or I stand in your way and I stop you from doing what you want.
Right. I can think of one base in particular where this happens fairly regularly, and that's that on the southwest side of Amherst, there's that construction base that links to Scarfield. I think it's between Cobalt Calm and West Pass Watchtower, and it links to the lattice to the left. And people build construction bases on top of the point of that vehicle base to force people to engage with the base to cap the 1 minute capture time.
Burgess, right? Burgess Overlook?
No, that's on Indar, isn't it?
Oh, which continent were you talking about?
Amherst.
Oh, okay. So I'm looking at Amherst. And where were you saying?
West of West Pass Watchtower.
Fisu's still loading a bit. Okay.
Yeah, in between West Pass and Cobalt Calm in the lattice.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So there's Hayoko to the north, Wokuk to the south?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, I see. I think it's where those two roads kind of almost blend together. If you put a base right there in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a capture point there. There's a base that links the two lattice lanes together, and you can do a cutoff or you have another point of attack.
Yeah. Okay.
And from God's perspective, if we're really intent on getting to the next base, because that's always the overall goal. It's never, let's go fight this construction base for the sake of it. It's we need to kill this thing that's in the way of what we actually want to do. So what we do is, pull armor and just try to break it down. And usually it's a 1 or 2 person base, and it's not an issue. It's not a fight. It's not really anything.
Yeah, I agree. Most of the time it's 1 or 2 base builders, and that isn't difficult to disassemble when you have more than 12 players. or even I guess 6 players, you can handle it. I'd say that you bring up a fair point to say that my applicability, my relevancy is limited in value compared to a soldier on a point, an infantry. I don't dispute that. Even as a Vanguard player, I still wouldn't dispute that. I'd say that the playstyle of building a base speaks to me in a way that driving a tank doesn't. That being a heavy assault with a thumper doesn't.
Right.
And my ability to participate in the same way you did is limited to the game mechanic assigned to me when I'm participating in that playstyle. If I could, I would build a wall inside of a base. If I had that ability, I would be more useful in that instance, and I try to do that. I'm not able to, so the best thing I can do is find another way to get in your way. And that's the best I have, because I want to play the playstyle, and I want to try to be relevant. So I have to find a way to make those two work.
And I think this gets back to the initial thesis that I had in my video, which is all these different play styles kind of being at odds with each other, because Gobs, where our objective is capping bases either for an alert or just for, you know, a fun fight against other infantry players, and that runs into conflict with the construction builder who has put a base on top of a vehicle capture point and is actively defending it. And they're playing the game to, you know, supplement the defense or just enjoy building something and defending it. And so we've got these diverse playstyles that butt heads against each other and compete for, you know, their bugbear issues.
Why do you call it conflict? How do you see it as being in conflict with each other?
Because if we had our way, we would do or pursue what we enjoy in Planetside, which is the infantry fights, the point holds, the movement on the map, but from that gets frustrated when we have to stop what we're doing, and instead if we want to get to our end goal, which is in this case it's like Scarfield Reliquary, I think we have to engage with this construction base.
I see. I'm a speed bump to you.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay, that's fair. I get it. I'm a distraction to the main event. I'm infringing on your style of play.
Yeah, infringing is a word you could use, I guess, yeah.
I would use it to be fair to those who, I mean, to me it feels like, I imagine it feels frustrating that, okay, I have to deal with this in order to get back to the real show.
Right. And that's how I feel when, you know, I'm playing the game solo and there's a tank on a hill heshing a fight, or an air-to-ground guy coming back with an air hammer or a banshee. I in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I could pull something to go kill this guy, because there's no way I'm going to desi him, because, you know, desi doesn't go that fast. He's a decent pilot, so he's not going to fly into it. So I'm going to have to devote a certain amount of time and effort to get in an ESF to shoot this guy down. And if I do that, he may just repull, and then I'm off in this endless cycle of trying to fight this guy and keep him out of the air, when all I really want to do is fight on the ground, and have a nice, fun infantry fight.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Right.
I don't know the answer to this question. So what immediately came to mind when you said that is, at what point I'll just have to ask this in a bad way because I don't know how to better ask it. At what point am I supposed to interfere with your style of play? Is anyone supposed to interfere with anyone else's style of play in this game?
You could make the case that, a good player, like that Reddit thread was talking about, a sufficiently skilled player killing a new player is interfering with his style of play. And that comes back to what our idea of fairness is. Which definition are we using?
Full circle. Which definition do you think is the right one to use?
I'm not entirely sure. I lean towards in certain instances, like infantry versus infantry, I lean towards the fairness of you agreed to play this game. This game's 10 years old. There's people in this game who have played it for those 10 years and are skilled. And knowing that, you decide to engage with them. You decide to play the game with the implicit understanding that there's the possibility that you're going to run into those players, and it's not going to be an even, in terms of skill, matchup. But you can supplement that engagement with, time, experience, and other people around you. Instead of a 1v1 with a good player, make it a 2v1. Find a way to play with your friends to take down those big game. And then when it comes to aircraft, my definition of fairness are the tools that I have to deal with that air-to-grounder sufficient? Is it on par with the tools that he has to kill me? I don't think anyone would argue that the tools are equal.
I think you know where we'd be going with that one.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's an issue of scale here as well. I think Lex brought this up when you guys had your talk, is nothing in this game seems to be built for scale. And if you got one lock-on launcher against an ESF, it's not going to do jack. They can run away from it, they can just tank the damage and fire suppress and kill you through it. But if you've got 4 to 5 to 6 people with ground-to-air launchers, then that one Mossy is forced to leave that fight or die. But then if there's, 5 ESFs, and all those launchers are not going to focus the same target. They're probably not in comms together. And there's this multiplying effect that that everything in this game has. Like, if you're at a 60-40 fight, you're not. It doesn't feel like you're just up against more people. It's more people at the same time at different angles, and it's much harder to deal with. There's a certain threshold where it becomes unmanageable. Not just linear, but multiplicative.
Lex brought up the point that he didn't believe the game was developed to handle scale. Are you saying that you agree with that? Would you say that you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that in certain aspects. I think he applied it to the infantry side of the game with, damage, with the damage model of the guns. And I think you can take that pretty much everywhere else and say 3 ESFs is a significantly harder problem than 1 ESF.
What I didn't understand, and at the time I declined to really go into it because I didn't feel equipped really to talk on the same playing field. And I got some advice from another person who said, you should give it a go anyway. So I'll preface with saying this is not my strong suit when it comes to talking damage values. I am not a trained or studied designer in any way.
Right.
But it sounded to me as though that the way you just described it, which is not dissimilar from the way I heard Lex describe it in a different fashion, was that if I bring more guns and I bring more bazookas, that they're both considered to be, not, not balanced for scale. But what's the difference between, no, hold on. There is a difference between me bringing 17 tanks and 17 bazookas. They are not on the same playing field. And that never to me seemed to be in question here, but that's what I hear being questioned, is that, and I don't understand that, so help me understand it better, please. When you say it's not designed for scale, if I bring 17 tanks to a fight, to me it's obvious that the scale favors me heavily.
Right.
What am I missing? Like it didn't matter what damage value you apply. If I hit you with 17 AP cannons, one of you is going down.
Right.
and I can't quite put my finger on what is it that what's the root of what you're saying when you say that it's not balanced for scale?
Well, I think...
Yeah, take your time. We're not in a hurry.
I think we see this most starkly when it comes to the air game.
Okay.
Air in Outfit Wars has always been, I think, maybe not the deciding factor, but if you don't have a good air game, you are going to be suffering all match.
Yeah.
You're going to either not get your transports to where they want to go, or even if you get there, you're not going to be able to hold close to doors, or if there's particularly cheeky angles, you can't hold certain angles inside the room, inside the point room. And if you want to fight that, I don't think we've seen a team successfully fight air as infantry. We've seen teams win despite air with an infantry-focused, vehicle-focused team. But we don't see infantry players fight back against aircraft in mass. Even though we've got excellent tools like the Striker or the Lancer, they just take too long to put out the kind of damage necessary to kill more ESFs than infantry you lose. And I understand from one perspective that that's how it should work. Tanks should have a power disparity when it comes to infantry.
That's what I was looking for. That I couldn't find that word. The power disparity. Yes. Okay, please keep going.
But yeah, it feels like as infantry, you don't have even the option of fighting aircraft if there's a certain number of them, and if they're decently skilled, they know to dip out. They know when to dip out when they're taking too much damage, and they just go repair, and then they're back in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And all they really did was buy those 10 seconds, and even then, there's other ESFs in the area that are applying pressure during those 10 seconds.
Okay. what would it look like to balance for scale in that instance? You're in an L stack. Or dang, I keep saying that. You're in an L-shaped building or triple stack. 12 scythes appear overhead. They're A-to-gene.
Mhm.
What sort of balance would you think would be appropriate there?
Personally, I think ESFs should be air-to-air exclusively. I don't think they should have any air-to-ground potential. If you want to do air-to-ground, I think you should be relegated to a lib.
What does that mean? As in, ESF should not be in the game?
No, ESF should be exclusively air-to-air. I think, killing transports and killing air-to-ground.
Should they have a nose gun?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like a Saron, a default anti-vehicle nose gun.
But I can then turn my nose gun on a person, couldn't I?
Right, but the killing potential of a nose gun, like a default nose gun, is you have to be so fine with your aim and the time it takes and how difficult it would be to land all those shots. You'd have to be somewhat stationary, so you're much easier to kill, and it's much harder for you to kill infantry. You could still do it for sure, but you don't have splash damage. You don't have the maneuverability that you could get away with an air-to-ground weapon.
So introduce accuracy is what I'm hearing. Force an accuracy measure to be adhered to. Versus
that could be another way of dealing with the issue. Yeah.
Okay. Lex said in the chat here just now that he thinks explosives are the biggest culprit. Do you agree? Do you see it the same way?
Well, yeah, we've all been at those nascence fights where it's essentially just those 3 hallways getting spanned with underbarrel grenade launchers or grenade bando frags, sticky nades, pounder maxes, desi primaries. At a certain point, nascence devolves into who's spamming explosives, and it just turns into a deadlock because everybody's just they can't push. They're losing all their shields to splash. They're losing all their health to splash. And
then one of them hits if they die, and then revive grenades everybody.
right. If they die, they have to rely on a revive grenade if they pushed, because no medic is going to be able to reach them. So pushing through a nascence tunnel becomes entirely fruitless. You have to go one of the other routes, and at least there are those other routes. But in the other domains, air to ground or Hesh on infantry, those other routes may not exist. And it's very dependent on base design. Some bases you may be able to get to point without air to ground having the ability to kill you.
Okay. I see where you're coming from. At best, or I'm sorry, at worst, I hear an argument for why something like A to G rockets should leave the game, or the indirect radius should be reduced,
or the role of ESS rethought altogether.
But
maybe
how do you do that, how do you tell a ESF pilot, no, you shouldn't be shooting at someone on the ground?
I'm not sure. I mean, Nanoweave was effectively removed from the game with the nerfs that it received. So clearly there is a way to remove something from the game without, just straight up deleting it.
There's something that is escaping me, and it's in the vicinity of the same thing I see as a Vanguard player. Almost every Vanguard player I know uses AP. AP has no indirect fire.
Right.
If you miss, you miss completely. but we all use AP except for me because I have the rewards cannon, so I have to use heat because it looks cool. But I would use AP if I could. We still shoot people with AP, infantry, vehicles alike. It doesn't matter that it has a 100% pass-fail ratio. I will still use AP every day of the week if I could, even though I have every incentive to shoot everything else but infantry because of how skinny you all are and how fast you're moving. And it's kind of like, I believe I heard Lex say this once, it doesn't matter how much you nerf my gameplay, I'm still going to find a way to kill you. And I feel the same way in an AP Vanguard. No matter how much you nerf me, I'm still going to find a way to put a round right through your face.
Right, and I think that goes to the point of we need to rethink how or what role vehicles play in the game.
Okay.
Because you're right, they're always going to find a way to kill infantry. I do think there is a certain amount of balance that you could do, like, air to ground not having any splash, therefore it requires much more fine-tuned aim. I think people would have a much better time accepting dying to a vehicle if they knew that this person made themselves very vulnerable by hovering in one spot and trying to nose gun me with a Mustang versus this guy's just flying in circles in hover mode, air hammering the whole fight and racking up kills.
Gotcha. I don't disagree with that. Okay. And I want to come back to this because I skipped over an important point that you made. How you said about 3.5 minutes in that in extension to the content being added and it failing to appeal to the playstyles, you made a comment that you didn't think the developers had a strong understanding of how the different domains complemented playstyles. What did you mean by that?
Well, going back to the Osher example, I hear from good players, good vehicle players, and bad vehicle players alike that they don't like Osher, even though it was explicitly stated that Osher was designed with vehicles in mind. Mm-hmm. I feel the same way about containment sites. They were specifically designed, I think, from just looking at how vehicles can't get into containment sites, they can't participate in the fight. All they can do is kill the above ground spawns, but there's still the hard spawns inside the containment site. But I, as an infantry player, do not enjoy fighting at containment sites because, respawn and then run for 1.5 minutes trying to find the fight in a containment site is not fun.
Oh, so I'm not the only one then. I thought it was just me because I don't play in them very often. I'm like, where the F am I going?
No, I
have to stare at the ground and follow the arrows.
I've got a bit of a hot take. I think containment sites are very straightforward, very easy to understand how to get to all the different places if you just put enough time into exploring them. But there's a problem of how long it takes just to get from spawn to one of the points or wherever the action is.
Oh man, it takes me forever to get there.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So do you believe that if the developers had a strong understanding of how these different domains complemented playstyles, do you think that they wouldn't be making these mistakes?
Well, I think they do better. I don't know if they would not make any of these mistakes, but I think they'd be better on base design for a lot of the bases that we see.
Okay.
I don't. This is a bit of an aside, but I don't understand the rationale of removing biolabs on Asimir and then putting in worse versions of biolabs back onto Asimir with containment sites.
I think that was a lore thing.
That smacks of this is a change by someone who doesn't understand the infantry domain.
I saw that as not only a lore change because of the storms, but also a chance for him to try something, a variant of a biolab.
Right.
Whether or not it was successful or not, I saw it as an attempt. How did you see it?
I'm not entirely sure. Biolabs on Esamira were pop syncs because everybody wanted to fight in biolabs. Pop sync? That is just, there's one base or two bases on the map that have action at them that everybody's at, and those are the biolabs.
You say pop sync or hot sync?
Pop sync. Okay. Population sync.
Got it.
And I think Rel, I'm not entirely sure, but I think he wanted to get people out of those biolabs and get them moving the map more, playing the map more.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he did it in maybe the worst way possible. It was giving us an inferior version of biolabs that no one wants to fight. You took out bases that people wanted to fight at, and then you put in bases that people ignore or they zerg. As well as getting rid of the surrounding satellite bases that were actually kind of fun.
I don't blame him for experimenting. I don't think it doesn't feel wrong to me for him to experiment on such an environment. But I don't disagree with what you're saying either. I'm still just as confused in containment sites.
Right. I do sympathize with someone in Rel's position who is working on a game that is 10 years old, and he's obviously got some creative tendencies that he's trying to explore. How do you shake up and create something in a game that's 10 years old? People have expectations and ways that they enjoy playing the game. I definitely think there are ways of creating in Planetside without, removing what people like.
Do you have
PTS?
any? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead. What were you saying about PTS?
I was just saying, PTS to some extent is not a valid way to test things because you just don't have the volume for things like a base change. You might have a few people check it out, the people who are really dedicated, but you're not going to get enough people to actually see how it plays out.
How would you do it?
I'm not entirely sure, but I probably wouldn't do it with biolabs. I probably wouldn't remove biolabs and replace them with something. Maybe try. It's difficult. You have to think of somewhere on the map to place a containment site that would actually get traffic, but
probably
not
the middle.
But then you're taking away ISO, which people have their issues with current ISA, but I think it'd be better. It's still better than a containment site.
So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I would like to do this thought experiment with you because I'm just curious at this point for myself. If you were Rel, if I were Rel, you said you weren't sure how we might do it instead. Rel is on the hook for doing something. What would we do? If the power lied with us and we had to make a decision and no decision was worse than making a decision, what would we do instead?
Well, I think in a certain sense, there's nothing you really can do because this game has always been developed and always been marketed as, a sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
MMOFPS. You got all these different ways of playing the game. And at this point, if you start removing playstyles or nerfing them to the point of removing them, then you're going to turn off that portion of the game. And I don't know if that's going to be a net positive. I don't know if that's going to result in more people coming back to the game to enjoy a different playstyle.
Is that where you talk about at 4 minutes what drives people away because of the poor integration?
Yeah, I'm not so confident in this assertion that I made, but
Okay.
I do
And
think
that's okay. That's all right.
I do think that the lack of focus for all the different playstyles, the everybody has their own playstyle and they pursue their own objectives. I think that does result in the conflict that we see between playstyles.
Can you say that a different way? I hear what you're saying, but I'm not processing it.
So I go through the list of things in the video, like midfits playing for alerts, and Zergfits playing for just capping bases, Zerging down a lane, or whatever it is that they're after. And we've got these two groups of people who are playing the different games, essentially. One team has, or one group has subscribed to a particular rule set. They've subscribed to a particular goal that they want to accomplish. And the other has chosen a different goal that negatively impacts the other group's attempt to complete their goal, even though they're on the same team. So we've got, one team trying to play for the alert and not get too much territory, or just push the right bases that are on the outside of the map, and then you got the Zergfit that's pushing the center of the map, capping way too much territory, and forcing a 2v1.
Do you put that at Planetside feats? Do you put that fault at Planetside because it allows that circumstance to exist, because it doesn't offer disincentives or incentives for another style? Why is it that you put it at Rel, the developer, or the game itself?
I don't know if I put it at Rel's feet. I put it at I guess the idea behind Planetside at all. Planetside 1. How do you... I didn't play Planetside 1, so I don't know if it's entirely one-to-one with Planetside 2 on, the scope and the goal and the objective of the game. But I make the comparison to CSGO, where it's a very straightforward rule set. It's a very straightforward, clear goal. All you have to do is either kill the enemy team, or plant or defuse a bomb. That's all you have to do. There are complexity and depth in how you accomplish that goal, but there's one goal that everybody who is in that match roughly agrees with pursuing.
That sounds like a version of fairness.
Yeah, I think so, because
Okay.
everybody in this match has agreed to a rule set, and regardless of the skill disparity, regardless of what weapons anybody buys, they all agree that they're going to play the game and abide by the rule set and pursue the same objective.
And would you say that Planetside 2, a game that allows for the opposite of that, is it that Planetside 2 shouldn't exist in that fashion? How would you describe Planetside 2's sin in this case?
I think it's similar to most MMOs. You've got this open world where I think 10, 20 years ago is much more interesting, just to explore what is possible and see all the different things that have been created by, this technological wonder, and just see what is possible, what exists. But nowadays, MMOs are kind of on a decline, I think, and people are over that initial sense of wonder at exploring and seeing what is possible, and they're getting more and more siloed into what they find enjoyable, and it's more specific, and they know more what they want. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's, if I'm active listening enough here, it sounds like Planetside 2 is almost a victim of its own success, where it tries to straddle the middle ground, or at least straddle in a unique differentiation from, say, your conventional MMO that will silo you into that. It forces you into conflict with other playstyles that disrupts your own, so that you can never stay, I guess you could say, comfortable in your own existence. Planetside 2 will, you can, a Lex or an Anethual will drop on top of you, and suddenly my base building doesn't matter anymore. And it sounds like that freedom of movement, call it, makes it almost as chaotic and as unhappy as in real life.
Right. Could you maybe strengthen that comparison? I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing the connection.
So you were just commenting MMOs, and I see the link that you're making is that MMOs, if you want to be a miner in MMO, you just go to PvE realm and you don't even worry about PvP. You just mine all day, every day, do what you need to do, go to the marketplace, sell your wares, and then, iterate over and over. Try and do that in Planetside 2, where you're an ant and you're cordium mining, and suddenly fucking 12 scythes come out of nowhere and bomb me to oblivion. Like that.
Right.
It might not be 12, but I will get 2 random mossies and they will just burn me to death. And I'm like, just leave me the hell alone, bro.
Well, there is an element of, or there was an element of that in WoW, where I don't know if they have PvP servers anymore, but they had them at one point. So you could just be, in some contested territory doing your quest line, trying to level up, and then some guy who's doing PvP comes along and kills you. You've got competing goals in that scenario. One guy's trying to level up and the other guy's trying to kill people.
From what I understand, there are, I've only played WoW for probably 10 minutes in my life. Lex will probably have to chime in here because he's played far more, I think, than either of us. But from what I understand, there is a PvE realm where you don't have to deal with other people infringing on what it is you've got going on. Doesn't exist in Planetside 2 unless you're in Realm, VR, which doesn't really count in my opinion. So if I try to do that, where I try to enjoy the game in that way, I can get my world turned upside down by someone looking to do that. Or even someone who accidentally happens upon me, just decides they want to kill me and they have the power to do it. So when you were talking about the strength of the comparison, what I was saying is that, whereas you mentioned, I think rightly, that people have gotten tired of seeing that iterative cycle of, I do what I want, I get what I want. I do what I want, I get what I want, over and over again. There's no challenge, there's no spice. Enter Planetside, try and do that. You will inevitably get disrupted by someone who is at the right place at the right time, and you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. That introduces a bit of frustration and spice, but I would connect it to what you were saying, to say that it introduces a level of chaos in a way that is unmitigatable. Whereas in, WoW or elsewhere,
I think I was making the opposite point. Not that
Oh, you were?
people are getting
Okay.
tired with this iterated experience that they're pursuing. It's that people are seeking out these iterated, you know, if they're infantry, they're looking to fight other infantry. Not because it's what's available, but because it's what they prefer.
All right, hit me with it one more time, because I obviously wasn't active listening well enough.
So, I think at the height of MMOs, people were taken by the scale, by a sense of wonder of getting out there and seeing what exists, seeing what had been designed, and just fully explore the space. And then once the space was fully explored, they siloed into whatever it is that they preferred, what they liked doing. So in Planetside, everybody, gawks at the Bastion the first couple times they see it. Wow, the scale! Look at the size of that thing. Look at those massive Mauler cannons. Look at all the air trying to kill it. And then, maybe the 5th or 10th time, you're not marveling at it anymore. You're just angry that it's killing you with its orbital cannons.
Yes. Yep. Well, nowadays with Larian, though, I just released my video this morning. I killed 3 Bastion hardpoints with a Larian.
Oh, that's one of the new tank guns?
Yeah, it's a new Chimera gun. It shoots like a laser cannon.
Okay.
I played
with the new VS gun, and it was actually pretty fun. I'm not a good judge of what's balanced in the vehicle tank domain. I think that's the domain that I have the least amount of time in, but it was interesting. I liked that you could charge it up and then just hold that charge forever. You got 3 shots ready to go whenever you release the mouse button. It's not like the Lancer where you have to charge up and then, it fires off regardless of whether or not you release the trigger or not.
Yeah, I haven't really... VS is my weakest faction. I spent the least amount of time in VS for everything. I think I maybe spent 10 seconds in a mag rat. I'm like, nope. Definitely not skilled enough for this thing.
It's goofy, that's for sure.
Okay, I wouldn't say that I disagree with what you were just commenting on. I feel like it's such like it can tentacle and spiderweb out into so many ways. I don't know how to frame a response in a way that seems relevant.
Yeah, I struggled writing this video because I kept trying to expand concepts and ideas, and I just kept tangenting away from the point I was trying to make. I think there's so much that goes into this discussion that in order to fully flesh it out, it would be a nightmare.
Yeah, it would take a lot of parts, a lot of hours. And to your credit, I read it after I watched it. I thought it was very well put together. There was just, and I'm being sincere when I say this, there was so much content packed into 5 minutes. I'm not surprised that we're at an hour and 40 minutes, and I'm only 2/3 of the way through some of the comments that I wrote down. Right. Your comment about how it felt like a symphony out of tune and out of rhythm, to me, really struck. I think you and I agree very much so on that. And it throughout our conversation, what I started landing on was that the out of tune felt more like it was out of tune because the players, some of them decided to play off key. Some of them decided not to tune their instrument. Some of them decided they wanted to over-tune it, and they're a little bit too hardcore into it. The out of rhythm to me kind of speaks to the developer, the conductor, which we might say in this case is rel. Whereas the rhythm, he's playing at 3/3 timing when we're playing at 4/4 or a 4/3 timing or whatever. And that rhythm combined with the out of tuneness of the instruments just creates this chaotic middle school grade performance that you're really there because you love the person you're there to watch. But if you had your pick, that to me is where I'm landing on this thing. And I wouldn't say that I fully agree that the conductor is out of rhythm or that the out of tune is necessarily a negative thing, but I don't disagree at all that the symphony sounds chaotic and disorganized. I don't disagree at all that this is a song that if I could choose, maybe I would turn the channel.
Right.
I agree with you that there are adjustments that need to be made, probably even major adjustments. I'm listening to the full orchestra play, and I know that there's something at odds. I'm not entirely sure which instrument to target because I'm not a balance nerd. I don't study the craft enough, like say you or Lex might. But I agree with Lex what he's talking right now. It is the conductor's job to get everyone on the same sheet. You and I will not disagree on that.
Right. We have to agree what rule set we're using, what we're playing by. You see this in community events in Planetside where they massively narrow and focus the experience. They decide what weapons they're going to ban, what bases are in play, where in those bases you're allowed to be, because otherwise people will abuse that and find positions that are too strong.
Yeah, that seems right to me as well. Like for the Devil Dogs on NC Connery, our specialty was mass organized gameplay, which is overly broad and ambiguous, but it had a very specific application on live. To me, it was so specific that I credit that with our longevity. Whereas if I recall, TXR was more of a more competitive TR. Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I would say slightly more competitive. They're like a mid-fit, maybe. I think the game was still kind of in exploration mode. People were still trying to figure out what works for the most part, but they were using galaxies to drop bases and ESFs to fight air and stuff like that.
Yeah. And those gameplays definitely did crop up with the benefit of population for sure. Right. So when you start delving into what can be done, and that was about 4.5 minutes in, you start talking about the potential redesign. How and the end result you said is that interactions don't feel cheap or unfair, or that vehicles need something compelling. And I appreciate that you offered an alternative to just cheap and unfair and what that might entail.
Right. The problem with that second proposition, though, is how does that alternative objective for vehicles, how does that link back into the main game?
Yeah.
It can't just be some one-off thing in the corner that has no bearing on the rest of the game.
Yeah, Lex has been talking about in chat right now for us is how does that go back to what the game has promised to deliver? Does it?
Right.
Does it interrupt your gameplay loop for an expansion of the Ghost Bastion? It probably certainly will if its maulers start targeting you.
I have not been on the ground near a Ghost Bastion, so I have not experienced that side of things, but I have been part of the airballs that killed them in like 40 seconds.
I'm telling you, that thing literally lasts 10 to 30 seconds max. I caught it once when I was doing the Larian, because I was like, oh, a Larian, I can maybe target that Bastion next. I look at the map again, it's gone. I thought that it had cloaked or something. I'm like, is it still here? Like, where did it go?
The Ghost Bastion is very much content for air at this stage of the game.
Ghost Bastion is very much ghosting right now.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was funny to watch.
Do you think there could be like a ground vehicle equivalent to the Ghost Bastion?
I sure hope so. Like I think I responded back to you in our DMs. I wrote an article back when I was writing articles every week or so for like Server Smash and everything else on MMO games and whatnot. I wrote an article about, and it was called Random Acts of PvE. It was just like a tongue-in-cheek thing. But what I pretty much said was, wouldn't it be cool if there were random armor columns of unaligned, a fourth faction? I didn't know it at the time, but I was describing NSO, which hadn't been released yet. But wouldn't it be cool if there was an NSO faction that just started at one end of the map and then traveled to the other end of the map and targeted anything that got in its way? I would be at that fight so fast, I wouldn't care anything about Lex running across Tarek. Have fun. Do your thing. Light assault. I will flash race myself all over there just to get a crack at those guys.
Do you think that could be designed in such a way that air doesn't show up first and kill it immediately? Because right now, air feels like the master domain. It impacts almost every facet of this game.
To me, air always was kind of like the Primarch, mainly because of its freedom of movement in the sky. And it's so difficult to hit, mostly. Sometimes it is, but easy. But most of the time it's difficult to hit because of how you can just freedom of movement. Up, down, left, right, boost forward, even the slightest arc, and how you tilt can throw my shot off. But I've found that when our armor team really wants to kill air, they don't come anywhere near us. Whether you have a Sky Guard or, in my case, the Ranger, the tools that we have at our disposal more than compensate for air. So if they were to fit some sort of like auto, almost like the auto alarm modules on a base construction, but make that like Sundays with the Rangers, I don't think you'd have an air problem as much as you would right now with the Ghost Bastion.
Okay, so if the
higher skill players, it wouldn't stop them. They'd be able to A to G from long range,
right?
And okay, you know what? They've earned that. But you make that tank column large enough, you put enough Rangers on top, anybody with the Reaver comes near is just going to get annihilated. And that's cool. That's fine if that's what they want to go for. Because I'm coming at them with a Vanguard as fast as I can.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the tech side of things how likely that is, but I could see how that would address the issue of air showing up first and annihilating the column before, tanks have the ability to show up.
Yeah, well, nowadays I'd be much more concerned about an orbital strike. To me, if you got like I think you'd have 4 orbital strikes before you lose your gate capacity. 2 outfits with 2 orbital strikes might be enough to destroy the whole thing.
Right.
Unless you expanded the Fallout component of the Colossus to be an AoE, then you have a lore foundation for anti-orbitals for this NSO Ghost column.
That's a better solution than what I had in mind, which is like a no deploy zone for orbital strikes.
That's definitely the way they've been working with construction. Just put a big old no deploy zone around something.
What do you think that says about how the things interact with each other? If we've got to limit how construction interacts with the rest of the game, by placing no deploy zones,
it's not a positive thing in my opinion. I don't fault them for relying on that mechanism because it makes it easy. It's like reducing the amount of variables you have to contend with. This game already has enough of those. I don't fault them for doing that. I don't think it's an overly positive thing because of the way life works. and as a construction player, well, no, as a tank player, you don't get to decide how you interact with me. What you get to decide is how you get to deal with me. If I find a way to get to your spawn point, I can tell you most spawn points, I can find a way to put my crosshairs on. I've got racer, I know how to angle physics, I know how to get the right angle to where just my tank cannon is showing. Sometimes I expose myself overly, but I'm still going to get a shot on you as soon as you come out. It's just, I've been playing long enough to see how that works. But that to me is the game in its entirety, is the application of human interaction towards each other. So when I see a mechanic like construction that is wholly, what's the word, removed from the AoE, that to me tells me that, I don't know, it's too hot to handle. They don't want to see.
Go ahead. I may,
I think
if you give infinite freedom for something as powerful and creative as construction, then you will be shocked and appalled at what the community produces. Back when hives were still part of the game, the victory point generators, you'd find people putting bases like outside the map underwater with their hive generators. And it was an absolute nightmare trying to keep a continent open, because as soon as it unlocked, there's people at the enemy warp gate, putting a hive inside terrain or something. So you have to have restrictions on this extremely powerful tool.
I don't disagree in principle with what you're saying. Like, I can't sit here and say that sounds bonkers to me, because it doesn't. It does make sense that would be a viewpoint. So I don't blame anyone or the devs for saying we would rather just not deal with it at all. I'm saying that there's a good middle ground. Construction is powerful if you have enough people to see it through. However, there's a big asterisk after that. One, construction is super vulnerable. Even before the nerf, the router nerf, all of that, I was fighting all day long against random infills that would kill my base, and I'd have to redo it again. And that takes a lot of time and investments.
Right.
But even if I had a team at my disposal, which we did end up having, where we could mitigate that problem, it still never took away the time investment and the manpower required to make it relevant to the fight. I don't know how to communicate this in a way that I think makes sense. What I'm trying to say is that construction is powerful. I don't see it as any more powerful than a tank because of the amount of variables that go into a construction base, where any singular variable can mean exploitation and failure on my part. If I misplace a wall, someone could just waltz right in. If they destroy my alarm module, which is not difficult to do, it brings down all of my automated defenses. There's so much that can go wrong on a base. 2 people, I'm smoked. 2 people who know what they're doing, 1 person who knows what they're doing, I'm still mostly smoked. It's not so powerful that it's unmitigatable. I just don't think the player base has had to been forced to deal with it in the same way that they had to vehicles.
Right.
Because I don't see you saying that about vehicles, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Because you know how to deal with vehicles. C4 will blow me out of the sky. And now you've got tribes filtered, bro. Like, you can
I think they're roughly on the same level. Like, if there's a base that has an orbital strike, that's constantly launching on TI alloys, disrupting the fight every 5 minutes or so, then I have to go through that dilemma of, okay, am I willing to invest the time, the effort, and the agony to try and kill this base or would I rather just ignore it? It's the same thing with vehicles. Am I comfortable just taking the random death to an air hammer or a Hesh tank? And would I rather just focus on playing infantry, or do I want to potentially get sucked into this vicious cycle of trying to keep this guy out of the air? They're
That's a
on
tough
equal
decision.
planes to me.
I can appreciate that. I appreciate that dilemma. My hope, and I know that nowadays it's not a realistic hope. It used to be, in my opinion. My hope is that when I come at you with whatever it is I've got, force multipliers, multiple people with force multipliers, my hope is that you find a way to deal with me as I have to deal with you, getting one framed, getting just god tiered by people I can't hope to get even a 0.5 KD on. I know that I'm outclassed, but I'm still going to try anyways. The point I'm bringing up here is that I have to use that as a crutch to be relevant in this game, and I know Lex will agree with that. But to me, this game is about that.
So
yeah,
I think that goes back to our different definitions of fairness.
Okay.
So and I think there's a pretty, maybe not even, but a pretty even divide when it comes to which definition of fairness people are going to apply to certain scenarios. And I think it's largely probably a personality trait that's built into people to some extent. So I don't think we're ever going to escape this dilemma of what people find fair in general, but particularly in Planetside. If I've got the same tools as you as an infantry player, on its face, with the same, rules, and you agreeing to the engagement to some extent, it seems like a fair engagement. But on the other side, there's this skill disparity that makes it seem like it's an unfair engagement.
Would you be a supportive of, let's just take something black or simple and say higher walls, where I have to work even harder to get my tank into an elevated position, which is already kind of like 75% of the way toward impossible. Most bases, I'd say most bases where it matters, I have to work very hard to get into a good spot. Like
Did you see the starting clip of my video? Is me and that squad trying to hold the L stack, and we're just getting heshed from every single angle.
Some of them.
I get it. It's sure it's designed for vehicles, not for infantry, but that was a fucking hellhole.
There are places where it's just, probably could use a little bit of a nerf in terms of my freedom of movement in the Vanguard. I won't disagree with you on that, but let's say as a general rule, most of these bases, they get some sort of obstacle, like Havar. Havar the other day, I noticed, was they introduced new railing on the inside pathway where I can't get my tank up the inner what are they called? Stairs. Right. I can't get them up there anymore because they put railing above on the ceiling. So they narrowed the gap of what can get through the middle, which I think was brilliant. I have a video on it that I'll end up releasing here soon enough about it. To me, that was smart. Now I can't get my Vanguard in there, which is probably the point. If they were to do stuff like that across the board, I could get over the fact that, okay, now I can't just, AP round you everywhere you go. Would you be supportive of that sort of separation?
I mean, at that point, what are vehicles for?
Well, there's still quite a few armor battles going on. I'm not wanting for armor battles. It's just scarce enough to where it doesn't occupy my attention 100% in a single gameplay session.
Right. I'm kind of going back to the point of how does armor contribute to the main objective of Planetside? If it's killing spawns and killing infantry that are trying to cap points, then and you take away killing infantry, then there's just killing spawns or armor, right?
Yeah. Well, I always thought that maybe, like you mentioned, giving me something else to do rather than farming infantry, I would love it. I'd be all for it. There are a lot of ways that has been introduced over the years. I think farming infantry is a component of what I need to be doing as an armor person, because every person I kill going toward A point is one less person shooting at my people at A point. That's simple math to me. But my ability to make that a reality, I agree that there could be some scaling back of that. And I don't feel like I would be totally useless if that were to occur. It's not, and I'm drawing mainly on my early days of Planetside 2, where I was fighting more tanks than I was people. And
yeah, it definitely
felt
feels
like
the other way.
That felt like what armor needed to be doing. I was clearing the way as armor for my people to get through. And I know Lex and I talked about that, where he said he didn't really appreciate it as much because he had to wait for people like me to clear the way for them.
Right. But
and
nowadays,
I can appreciate that.
Nowadays the meta is, we skip that that environment entirely and fly over it with galaxies and anvil in a bus or hack out a bus. We skip those midfield fights, which I don't think were ever that interesting to begin with. But
oh man,
for vehicles, maybe, but certainly not for infantry.
Okay. See, I didn't know that until I talked to Lex, and now talking to you. I thought that it was fun for everybody because it was fun for me. But apparently that's not the case at all.
People certainly have some rose-tinted glasses, I think, on the infantry side when they talk about midfield fights. And I think that might have been what construction was initially supposed to be, is to support the midfield fights and, provide some cover for infantry to play around in. But it turned into a nightmare scape of, solo infiltrators trying to kill a base because groups of infantry would rather avoid the base.
Yeah, I don't think we found the right balance for it yet. I'm with you on that one. Huh. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't fault him for trying, though.
Yeah, I think there's a continual feature creep that kind of has to happen with this game to try and draw people in. But and once you introduce a feature, it's very hard to get rid of that feature without people rising up in arms because you took away their new favorite thing.
Yeah, I remember Rel talking about that in, I think it was Deek's latest podcast, where he talked about it at a certain point, or maybe it was Cardo, at a certain point, the players assume the creative direction by the sheer volume of their expectations.
So what do you think it is that the Planetside community wants generally? Do you think their goals or their desires are aligned with even the original intent of Planetside?
My instinct answer is no. But I don't know why I believe that. It feels so convoluted that I don't know how to offer a good answer other than to say it feels like the original intent of Planetside and what we have right now are different and equally, I'm going to use a terrible word, but I don't know how to say it, inadequate. Like, it always felt like there was something left. Like I'm reaching, I haven't quite got it yet. And then when they did redeploy side, it felt like another in the opposite direction. I'm reaching, but I haven't quite got it yet. And now we're in a lattice system. I'm reaching, but I haven't quite got it yet. I don't even know if there is a right answer.
Do you think they're positive changes, or do you think they are negative? Because I can understand both arguments for, say, redeploy side. You want to increase or decrease rather the downtime between engagements. You want to keep people interested and invested in fights. But at the opposite side, you are cheapening the logistics aspect of the game, and you're introducing this ability to just drop in equal or greater numbers, and ruining the fight that way.
It feels as though both are true but negative. I don't know how else to say it. The fullness of the logistics of early Planetside 2 to me felt right. You had to earn your way to your next battle. I cannot I cannot overlook what you and Lex are saying about the unpleasantness of that, to the point where redeploy side feels more like a solution to that problem. Both of them seem to be true, but both of them seem at odds with each other, and the middle ground seems to be what we have right now. But that feels inadequate. So I haven't quite figured out what I think the answer is, except maybe higher walls. Something simple as higher walls, to where tanks can't just fire rounds across the low level walls and hit people as they're walking out of spawn. Like, that might make you feel a little bit more secure. Might make me work a little bit harder. But the diametrically opposed play styles, Afflick said it once, I think beautifully. The point of the game, it used to be where vehicles farmed vehicles and air farmed air, but then nowadays everyone's farming infantry. And that seems like the wrong way to end up. But redeploy side seemed like a good way to go from the deviation of days-long stalemates across Vanu archives.
Yeah, I don't know if that division of gameplay styles was as stark back then, because the Zephyr Lip was a thing on launch. I think Scourge of the Server was put a lot of time into Zephyr Lip when the game launched, and he was grinding towards BR100 to try and be first. The splash on the Zephyr Lip was absolutely insane. It was
a nightmare.
And I think even pre-CAI, as much hate as it gets, I think there were some good changes to lethality for ground vehicles against infantry. Like increasing drop or slowing down projectile speed, or decreasing explosive damage or radius. I agree there are a host of issues that came along with CAI, but I think generally there was much more vehicles farming infantry than what was just suggested. I mean, the Marauder, the Fury, those things had insane splash damage back in the day. And the survivability of the Harasser was also equally insane.
Is it your recollection that while there were some pretty insane, call it lethality variables, that like the splash, it seemed to me that there were equally enough countermeasures available in the form of population and armor, anti-armor. Dang it, what am I trying to say? There were equal enough measures to kill those things than there were things that were to kill you.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. There is a certain security provided to infantry through the sheer number of people who are playing the game, and that increasing the number of people who are playing armor to kill other armor and air to kill other air.
That's when I over idealize it. That's what I'm recollecting. It isn't that it was any less dangerous for infantry. It's that there were more armor players to kill other armor players. Like the armor battles were massive.
Yeah,
the best
just
time
makes
in my Planetside life.
Yeah, it just makes the absence of those things much more stark. Because if there's no air fighting the enemy's air, then you are having a hell of a time. We think air to ground is bad now, but back in the day it was absolute nightmare.
Okay. What else? What else is coming to mind?
I had an idea or a thought came to mind a little while back. What do you think of the unification of the resources in this game? Like back in the day, you had infantry, you had vehicle, and you had air resources, and each base provided a different resource. I don't know if the bases providing resources was a good way to distribute them between the factions, but I kind of like the idea of... I like and dislike the idea of being able to pull a tank, and then if that dies, you pull aircraft. It kind of...
It created a rotation.
It kind of encourages people not to be one-trick ponies, so to speak. But at the same time, that's that much more cheese that an infantry player has to deal with.
I agree with that. I always thought that the separation of the resources, that one of its unintended side effects of unifying everything meant that there was a player could rely on their preferred playstyle more. Because now I have nanites that I can spend on only one thing. Whereas before, when I ran out of tank resources, I had to pull a gal because I wasn't good enough as a reaver, and I would do ceiling drops for my squad. So I would be useful in that capacity if I wanted to continually pull vehicles. And to me, that seemed like the right way to go, because as soon as I got into a reaver, man, I might as well just kamikaze into something, because it's bad. But I could live gun, but that's not pulling a resource, unless I want to pull it and then logistics in and then give it to a squad mate. And that's a sort of like teamwork sort of enabler that I always thought was a very valuable thing that we lost out on. It forced it had many unintended positive side effects in my view for there to be separated resources. And it also, I remember it forcing us Devil Dogs to make decisions on what did we wanted to attack, which complicated where the fight was. Because sometimes there was a huge fight, like the biggest fight of all time, at a base that we sorely needed resources on in order to enable, our air squads. So either we open up a front on a base that doesn't have any resources that we need, or we just continue, we pile into a hodgepodge and just make a situation more messy in a base that we do need. Or vice versa. Like, it wasn't always if we pile on, it made it worse. Sometimes it was, okay, we really don't need to be here in this fight ghost capping, but we have to because of the resources.
Right.
It complicated the decision-making process, and I always saw that as a positive thing.
There is the aspect where, because back in the day, you had to cap almost every base or every base to flip a continent, and that meant that if you're the continent owner and you're getting focused to be won by the other faction, is that you're losing bases and you're losing resources, which means it's harder for you to fight back against those two outfits.
I always liked that gameplay mechanic. To me, it meant there was something to lose. When I was on the receiving end of that, it felt like I had to up my game, and whenever we played, and for me it was Armor Squads and Devil Dogs, I always felt like I had to perform at my utmost in order to gain those resources back so that we could affect our larger strategy. It gave me different motivation, more motivation to fight harder and longer. That's what I remember.
I remember fights lasting a lot longer. I remember the multiple day crown fights, although that may be due partially to, everybody's inexperience with the game, and I think the crown was probably much more difficult to cap back in the day.
I remember the crown being a sigh, like, oh gosh, we're in it for the long haul now.
but nowadays, I don't know if people would enjoy that kind of persistent fight anymore, or if they would just get bored and start siphoning off to ghost cap other lattice lanes.
I'm not sure either. I always held that I think the biggest objective retro that needs to happen is removing lattice. I always thought that being able to capture any territory anywhere, if I had the people or if I had the wherewithal to do it, like that to me seemed like the right way to do this. Keep redeploy side, fine. But if I want to deep strike next to Warp Gate and cut off the entire continent from VS or TR, if I can make it happen, why shouldn't I be able to do that? I always enjoyed that. One of the more parts, because that opened up strategy to the level that I thought the game should be at.
Back in my WTAC days, we definitely would have agreed with that. Not so sure that I would agree with that now.
What about that sounds wrong to you now?
I think there are issues with how that plays out, constantly trying to chase down that group that is capping bases that are linked by a single hex.
Yes.
And back in the day, you could flip points even if your previous base was contested or flipped. So it was an absolute mess.
As long as you started it.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about kind of the keeping the current capture mechanics fine. That's fine. Like if your base is under attack, you can't capture the next one. Okay. That's no problem. That to me seems an improvement.
It would be interesting to have that new rule set mixed with the old hex system. I don't know if it would lead to the same sorts of issues that we had back then of people flipping every base and lighting as many fires as possible, and then no fights really materializing out of it.
I thought I remember there being tons of fights materializing everywhere because of that.
That gave rise to the population.
And that gave the smaller fits actual purpose in different situations. Because now you've got, whether it be ghosts, because it won't just be ghosts, it'll be other smaller fits fighting other smaller fits, fighting bigger smaller fits. Like the pairing of population on random territories now seems to be positive. But maybe I'm missing something big here. What do you think?
Positive in what sense? Could you lay out a specific example?
A specific example would be Devil Dogs has 3 squads at Tariq, and Recursion drops on what's that fortress behind Tariq?
Recycling or depot?
But beyond
Stronghold?
The Stronghold, yes. You take that territory, it cuts off my main battle tank lattice. Now I have a decision to make. Do I split my force in half? Because if it's Recursion, do I have to pull back everybody at this point? Because whereas before I forced them to fight me at the front line, and I know my tanks can out DPS their heavy assaults. And to me, that's a straight math equation where I'm confident that I will win. But if recursion forces me to fight them on their terms, in situations where I'm not prepared, in places that I can't force multiply as easily, then now suddenly I have to react to them. I'm not forcing them to react to me, because the front line to me is always in my favor as a devil dog. I've got the brunt of my force face forward fronting toward the front line. And you come across me, all of my lines of fire are facing you. I'm at my best at that point. If you disrupt my ability to do that, which used to be the biggest problem that we had, where we had to split our forces in order to deal with backcapping in a way that we don't have to deal with now, that to me disrupted my ability to Zerg anything. Is that specific, yeah, or do I need to?
Yeah, that makes sense. A year ago or something, when we were still on Connery with goblins, we'd run against TTA, and we'd run into the issues that you're describing. But we still had the ability to split up our forces and attack different bases.
Sure.
And it seems like a big ask, apparently, for some of these large outfits to split up any number of forces and
that's true,
do more than one thing at once. So I don't know if you would need to bring back Hex system to get that kind of divide and conquer effect for smaller outfits. I think there may be some lattices that could be added in certain parts of different continents that could open up the map a little bit more, but I don't know if we need to go all the way back to Hex to allow smaller outfits to be more impactful.
Well, right now it feels at any given time, I'm most happy right now as a force commander in terms of being readily assured of my advancement with a force of 48 people or 96 or however many. There are only 7 or so fights possible on the front line at any given time, and of those 7, wait, I might have had that math wrong. There might only be 12 fights across the continent, and only about 7 or 6 of them are on my front line. And if I have enough people and I have enough coordination, it's like the Roman legion advancing across a battlefield. All you can do is run up against my shield wall. How can you circumvent me? I've got air. I've got tactical intervention teams ready to handle your random pulls. I've got my armor. I am at my best when all my troops are facing the same direction.
Right. And I think a response to that could be something tactical like Bale Assault, ESF ejection seat. It only takes one person to get through to put a beacon for the entire squad to drop in. And then that front line has been taken out of the equation. And you do that at 2 or 3 different bases, then you've got to decide which base you want to save. And if you go there, then the people at that fight that get pushed off can go reinforce the other 2 bases that are being pushed. So I think it's easier to circumvent than is presented.
Well, I can only speak from my experience. I don't feel circumvented.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. Even though Devil Dogs hasn't been able to fill the platoon quite like it used to be in years, the past couple years, I don't feel circumvented by smaller outfits nowadays.
Right. I will grant that the number
beacon,
of. Sorry, go ahead.
I would say the random beacon that's put down behind our lines at most disrupts my spawn of a few people who get killed, but that's really all you're talking about to me is my spawn, my respawn capability. You're not talking about disrupting my lattice, because I just drop 12 people on you and keep on respawning until you're dead, because all I have to do is kill your beacon. There's no permanence there like I used to see.
Right. I think there's a dearth of small outfits that have the capability to keep beacons up and alive,
Okay.
the way like a group of recursion BUA VCATs or gobs can.
Okay.
So that may be why you feel so secure.
Because I haven't faced them yet. I'll take that. Touche.
It's a terrifying thing. 3 squads of any of those outfits pushing either one base or 3 different bases.
All right. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, and ultimately, what is the goal of both sides? Is the goal for Devil Dogs to defend bases, or is it to
take continents?
Hold take continents.
Yep, that's our ultimate goal.
I think that would run into conflict with some of these smaller outfits who are just trying to cap one base, and they're not thinking about the bigger continent goal. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not.
And I'd say that's because we had the numbers to be able to think about it. We had the luxury of thinking at that level. Nowadays, we're talking about like defending a base because we pull like a squad or two. We have to get our numbers back up. But it wasn't that long ago where we had enough numbers to really think about the level of taking continents.
Right. Do you have anything else you want to talk about regarding the main points?
I think we hit it, man. I think we hit it. I really enjoyed this conversation with you.
I did too. One like sidebar. I think. What do you think of the presentation of the video? Because I tried to showcase different playstyles, so I didn't come across as just an infantry elitist who hates vehicles.
It didn't appear to me that you hated anything. And as far as like I'm showing it now, I think did you show? I don't remember you being in a vehicle. So
I pulled a Galaxy and I pulled an ESF. I did not.
Okay, I meant armor. My bad.
Oh yeah.
You a solo living or is living a solo galling like you're right now, like killing the Sunderer. that was funny.
Yeah, I had to throw in a little bit of air to ground to.
To me, that just kind of enunciated your talent, I guess I should say. That you were such a nuisance at solo gal level that the little skinnies on the bottom were having a tough time dealing with you.
Yeah,
like this HHCN guy who just got annihilated by your bulldog. I'm watching.
I tried to present that side of the argument where what might be going through these new players' minds as they're getting bulldog galled by one guy.
I didn't feel misrepresented or underrepresented from it.
Okay.
Your presentation made me want to learn more because it felt like a great place to start the conversation, and not in a combative way where I felt like I was defensive about it.
All right. Well, it sounds like it accomplished my goal.
Yeah, good, because I thought it was a really well made presentation in terms of what you had to say about it.
Well, thank you. I've always struggled with writing at length and fully expanding ideas, and that's why this video comes out to just over 5 minutes. I wish I had the capability to expand and fully flesh out these ideas, but if I did that, these videos would be hours long.
They would be as long as they are for me, and I don't count that necessarily as a gift.
Yeah.
You packed more content in 5 minutes than some of my videos did in an hour, and that, to me, I almost wish I could do what you were doing, because it feels like I have to expand in order to get my point across, where it felt like in 5 minutes you accomplished a lot of what someone else could be doing.
It's got its weaknesses, though. If it's 5 minutes, and someone may not understand what you're trying to put across.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the depth of something like a 2-hour video.
Yeah. But I think
at
it's so
least it's
easy
focused.
for someone to miss all the nuance of what we just did in 2 hours, whereas 5 minutes, I didn't feel like I missed any nuance whatsoever. I was
Alright.
eager to talk about this with you, and it didn't take a lot of time for me to get prepared, except to articulate what it is that I felt like I needed to say, which took longer than it took for you.
Alright, well, I
Right on,
appreciate
man.
that.
Anethual, I really appreciate our discussion. I'm glad that we were able to get this out.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. It was it's been bugging me, trying to put this down on paper and put it out there. And I'm glad that the discussion's been had, and I hope that people rethink how they approach these balance discussions.
Yeah.
It's ultimately a matter of what definition of fairness you're using in each scenario, and it's, I think, largely based on what your personality is, and I don't see a solution to that for a game with the diversity of playstyles as Planetside.
I don't either. I do keep coming back. I can't remember who said sometimes it feels like a tough relationship where you feel like you're getting spurned all the time, but you just keep coming back to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for talking with me. It was a pleasure.
No worries. I'm gonna grab some water and
yeah, likewise.
soothe my throat.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit the ending sequence. Thank you for everyone for coming out, Lex, and I appreciate the robust discussion, and Cupcake, and No Just Dat. Appreciate you all participating. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.